Let's be honest, the American legal system can seem ridiculously complicated, right? Well, today, we're going to change that. We're going to build a simple map that lays out the whole structure. You don't need a law degree for this, just a few minutes. Okay, let's jump right in.
Here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the idea of two governments running at once. Then, where all the laws actually come from, the four main sources. We'll spend a minute on something called common law, figure out which rule wins when laws disagree, and then finally, see how this all plays out with real-life examples.
Okay, so the first thing you absolutely have to get to understand U.S. law is a concept called federalism. It sounds fancy, but it just means that power is split. And because of that, every single person in the United States is living under two different sets of rules at the exact same time.
So let me just ask you straight up. When you're in the United States, are you following one set of laws? The answer is a big fat no. And understanding that is the key to everything else. You're actually answering to two.
Here's how it works. You have the national or federal government making laws that apply to the whole country. And at the same time, you have the laws of whatever state you happen to be in. So a federal law about, say, immigration applies to you, but so does the state law about the speed limit. They both have authority over you. It's called concurrent jurisdiction, which is really just lawyer speak for both are in charge at once.
Okay, so if we have two systems, the federal government and the state governments, where do they get their laws? Well, it turns out that inside both of those systems, the rules come from four main places. And importantly, there's a clear pecking order.
Right at the very top of the legal food chain, you've got constitutions. We have the big one, the U.S. Constitution for the federal system, and then every single state has its own constitution too. These are the master rulebooks that create the government and spell out its powers.
All right, one level down from constitutions, we have statutes. These are the laws you probably think of when you hear the word law. They're written down and passed by a legislature, like the U.S. Congress or your state's own legislature.
Now, below statutes, things get more detailed. We have regulations. So Congress might pass a really broad law, something like the Clean Air Act. But then they give power to an agency, like the EPA, to write all the nitty-gritty rules, the regulations that actually put that law into action. And finally, at the very foundation of it all is something called common law. Now, this is the one that can really throw people for a loop. It's not written by politicians or government agencies. It's law that's actually created by judges in courtrooms over time. Let's dig into that a little more. Seriously, this idea of common law is maybe the most unique thing about the American legal system, especially if you're from a country in, say, Europe or South America. It's the wild idea that judges don't just apply the law, they can actually make the law.
The whole system is built on something called precedent. It means that when a judge is deciding a case today, they have to look back at how other judges decided similar cases in the past. Those old decisions become the rule for the new case. The law literally gets built, one case at a time.
I mean, this quote just says it all, doesn't it? In a common law system, there are huge areas of law that you won't find written in some official government book. Instead, the law is the history of all the past court decisions. It's kind of like a living, breathing thing.
And this is a huge fork in the road for legal systems around the world. The U.S., like other English-speaking countries, has a common law system. That's totally different from the civil law systems you see in most of Europe, where they try to write down every single possible law in advance in these massive, comprehensive legal codes.
Okay, so you've got federal laws, state laws, laws from constitutions, from statutes, and from judges. It's a lot. So what happens when they clash? What if a state law says one thing and a federal law says the complete opposite? Who wins?
Well, believe it or not, the people who wrote the Constitution totally saw this problem coming. They built the solution right into the document itself. It's called the Supremacy Clause, and it makes it crystal clear. When there's a conflict, federal law is the supreme, or the ultimate law of the land, period.
So this gives us a really clear hierarchy, a pecking order. Here's how it works. Number 1, constitutions are king. No law can violate the Constitution. Number 2, a law passed by a legislature, a statute, can change or get rid of a common law rule made by a judge. And number 3, if a state law and a federal law conflict, the federal law always wins.
Okay, so we have our framework, we've built the blueprint of our map. Now let's put some actual places on it. How does all this theory about sources and systems apply to the types of law you actually hear about?
This chart makes it super clear. So, that judge-made common law we talked about? Well, that's where most of the rules for torts come from. That's the area of law for things like a car accident or a personal injury case. But if you're talking about most criminal law,
You're going to look at the statutes, the laws written by the state. And for the really big picture stuff, like freedom of speech, you go straight to the top of our pyramid, the U.S. Constitution. See? Every area of law has its place on the map.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big question. If we have this map, if there are all these clear rules and hierarchies, why does it feel like the law is always changing, always being argued about? Well, it's because the map isn't set in stone. It's a living document. Courts are always reinterpreting it, and lawmakers are always trying to redraw the lines. And that's what makes the law so incredibly dynamic.